2 in the morning. The restaurant smells like yesterday. Stale bread, sour wine, and the bleach the waiters used to wipe down the oak tables. The hearth. My restaurant. My soul. And right now, it smelled like a morgue. I was sitting in the freezing dining room, wrapped in my chef's coat. I wasn't cooking. I was at table 7, the best seat in the house, staring at Eliza's laptop. My wife. My financial director. I wasn't looking for an affair. I was looking for money. We were sinking. The hearth was sinking. I didn't feel it in the numbers, I felt it in my gut. My vendors were starting to demand cash on delivery. The hostess asked for her paycheck 2 days early. These were the signs. Eliza told me everything was fine, that it was just a seasonal dip, that our investor would cover the gap. But her eyes were jumpy. 6 months ago, I would have believed her. But 6 months ago, my béarnaise sauce wasn't breaking on the line because I was skimping on butter. I broke into her QuickBooks. It wasn't hard. I'm a chef, not a hacker. But I know the passwords to her life. I tried her birthday. Our anniversary. The name of our dead dog. All wrong. Then I tried Save the Hearth. Ironic. The system let me in. I stared at the debits and credits. Rows of numbers I hated. They had no flavor, no color. I was looking for the leak. I scrolled through the expenses, and I found it. $5,000. Every month. For the last 3 months. $15,000 gone. The line item just said, G.L. Consulting. The chill in the room got physical. It slipped under my coat, grabbed my spine. G.L. There aren't that many people in Nashville with those initials who could be consulting my wife for $5,000 a month. Gabriel Lockwood. Our angel investor. A lump formed in my throat. It tasted like burnt garlic, a bitterness you can't fix. She was paying our investor? Secretly? For what? For his silence? For extra services? My stomach turned. I should have stopped. I should have stood up, gone to the kitchen, and started breaking down fish until sunrise. That's what I know how to do. But I didn't stop. I dug deeper into her files. If she was paying him, there had to be a contract. There had to be a something. I found a folder. It wasn't buried deep. The name, G.L. Project. My heart skipped. A password again. I tried Save the Hearth. Incorrect. I tried Gabriel's birthday. Incorrect. I sat in the dark, staring at the blinking cursor. My fingers froze. I wasn't thinking. I just typed the date. 11/04/12. The day we first met. The day I dropped a tray of oysters on her shoes. The folder opened. There were no contracts. No photos from hotel rooms. No love letters. There was one file. A PDF. 40 pages long. I opened it. The first page was my face. A grainy photo, taken with a long lens. Me, smoking behind the restaurant's back door. It was a private investigator's report. On me. On Daniel. G.L. Consulting wasn't Gabriel. It was a P.I.E. firm he'd hired. And Eliza. Eliza had been paying for it. With our money. With the hearth's money. I scrolled through the pages. My life for the last 3 months, documented at an hourly rate. Here I am, having a drink with our fish supplier. Time stamped, 11:40 p.m. Here I am, hugging our new hostess, Jenna, whose dog had just died. I remembered that day. She was sobbing by the dumpsters. The caption under the photo read, "Subject displays inappropriate tactility with female staff." More photos. Me at the farmer's market, tasting tomatoes. Me yelling at the butcher. Me asleep in my office. Subject is unstable. Subject exhibits signs of aggression. I closed the laptop. The silence in the dining room was deafening. She wasn't just looking for an affair. She was ordering one. $15,000 to prove that I was the bad guy. To find a reason. To justify something that was already hanging in the air. I didn't know what it was. But I understood the main point. Eliza wasn't afraid I was cheating on her. She was hoping I was. She needed a reason. She needed me to be guilty. I stood up. I wasn't cold anymore. I just felt empty. And a quiet, searing anger, like a perfectly heated cast iron pan. The question wasn't who was cheating on her. The question was, why was she so sure I was? And what was she hiding while she was so desperate to find fault in me? I didn't sleep. I drove home, showered, changed my coat, and was back at the restaurant by 6 in the morning for the bread delivery. I nodded to the baker. I checked the freshness of the time. I did everything I did every morning. But I saw everything differently. When Eliza came in at 10, smelling fresh, like expensive shampoo and coffee, she smiled at me. She said I must be tired, that I looked worn out. I nodded. I told her I was just worried about the bills. It was the perfect lie. Because it was the truth. She patted me on the shoulder, her nails lightly scratching the fabric of my coat. She told me not to worry, that she had a meeting with Gabriel today. That he would cover our expenses. She looked me in the eye and lied. And I looked back at her, knowing she had no idea that I knew. It gave me an advantage. But I didn't feel strong. I felt dirty. I started to remember. My brain, usually busy with fish temperatures and the acidity of sauces, started working like a detective. I rewound the tape. 3 months. The investor dinner. Right here, at table 7. I was in the kitchen, sweating, furious because my sous chef had overcooked the duck. I ran the plates out myself. I remember walking into the dining room carrying 2 perfect truffle risottos. And I remember the smell that hit me. Gabriel's cologne. Sandalwood and something metallic, powerful. The smell was so thick it smothered the aroma of my truffles. He was sitting next to Eliza. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me. He was smiling. And Eliza was laughing. She was laughing at something he'd said about spreadsheets. I remember thinking then that they were a team. The numbers team. And I was the fire team. I was glad that Gabriel was taking her anxiety. I was glad she was laughing. Idiot. I went back to the kitchen and punched the steel door of the walk-in cooler. The sous chef thought it was about the duck. Now I understood. They weren't laughing at the numbers. They were laughing at me. And the worst part. I deserved it. Partly. I wasn't a robot. I was obsessed. I remember every fight from the last year. Eliza, pale, holding printouts of the bills, begging me to cut the menu, to remove the expensive items, to cut staff. And me? I yelled. I yelled that she didn't understand art. I yelled that you can't save money on foie gras, that the guests come for the name, for the magic. I demanded that she just let me create, and the money would come. I remember her saying quietly that magic doesn't pay the electricity bill. I was impossible. I was chef 24 hours a day and husband 40. I was an egoist wrapped in passion. I had pushed her out of my life myself. I left the door wide open, and Gabriel just walked in. But that thought brought no relief. It only fueled the rage. I got on her laptop again that same night. She was at yoga. Her Find My dot was hovering over Gabriel's office building. I knew what they did. Now I needed to know why. I went into her email. I searched G.L. Consulting. I searched detective. And I found it. Not in the project folder. In the archive. The very first email. 3.5 months ago. From Gabriel Lockwood. Subject: Asset Protection. I opened it. It was a masterpiece. Legally sound, cold, convincing. Gabriel wrote to Eliza that he, as an investor, was deeply concerned. He wrote that I, Daniel, was the main threat to the hearth. He called me an artist like it was a dirty word. He wrote that artists are unstable, that they live on emotion, not logic. He wrote that before he and Eliza, poured another $200,000 into the restaurant, he and Eliza, had to be sure that I, Daniel, wouldn't leave for another woman, wouldn't have a breakdown, wouldn't burn the kitchen down. That I wouldn't leave them with the debt. He offered a solution. He had a discreet contractor. G.L. Consulting. He convinced her this wasn't spying on her husband. It was a reasonable business move. Protecting their shared investment. He even offered to pay for it himself, but Eliza, my proud, proper Eliza, must have insisted it was a restaurant expense. I stared at the screen. The last 6 months of my life clicked into a single, ugly picture. All those late-night meetings. All that support. He didn't just seduce her. He recruited her. He turned her into his agent. He made her believe that I was the enemy, and he was her only partner. He didn't steal my wife. He convinced her I was the thief. And she happily handed him the keys. I was ready for war. I shut down the restaurant for a sanitation day. I hung a technical difficulties sign on the door, even though the only technical difficulty was me. I got in my truck. My hands smelled like rosemary and rage. My plan was simple, like a good steak. I checked her Uber account, the one we still shared as a family. She had left an hour ago. The address was a high-rise in the Gulch, the most expensive part of the city. Gabriel's condominium. I drove. I don't remember how. The only words pounding in my head were, asset protection. He had turned her into a weapon against me. I pictured what I would say. I played out the scene. I'd bust in the door, they'd be there, wearing robes, drinking my favorite Sauvignon Blanc. I'd tell him that he was, what? That he'd won? I parked. I walked into the lobby like I belonged there. The concierge was busy with his phone. I slipped into the elevator. 34th floor. The penthouse. My heart was pounding somewhere in my throat, heavy as a lump of raw dough. I expected quiet music. The smell of expensive wine. I was ready to yell. I was ready to fight. I was not ready for the penthouse door to be standing wide open. I pushed it. The door slid over the hardwood floor without a sound. And I walked in. Silence. Not the kind of silence when people are hiding or making love. The kind of silence you find in an empty house. The apartment smelled. Not like Gabriel's sandalwood cologne. It smelled like fresh paint. And a vacuum cleaner. The apartment was empty. No couches, no tables, no stupid inspirational art. Nothing. Just the outlines on the light carpet where the furniture used to be. And the shadows on the walls where the frames had hung. And Eliza. She was there. She was sitting on the floor by the floor-to-ceiling window, wearing her expensive coat, clutching her phone. She wasn't crying. She was just staring out at Nashville, glittering with thousands of lights below her. She must have seen my reflection in the glass, because she didn't turn her head. She just asked what I was doing here. I told her I came for her. Or for him. She laughed. A hollow, dead sound. She said that he was gone. I didn't understand. I asked her where he was. She nodded at the empty room. He was gone. He had vanished. She explained it, slowly, as if the words were scratching her throat. He had sold the apartment. 2 weeks ago. He told her it was for tax optimization. The new owners were supposed to arrive today. She had come to get her things. But there was nothing left to get. He hadn't even left a coat hanger. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were dry, but red. She said that I was right about Gabriel. That he really had hired a detective. But I was wrong about the most important part. I just stood there, stunned. I asked her, what part? She said the detective wasn't watching me. The paws hung in the empty room, heavy as a side of beef. She said the detective was watching her. Why? Eliza explained, and her voice became flat, like she was reading a report. Gabriel was afraid. He was afraid she talked too much. Afraid that she'd get drunk or feel guilty and spill her guts to me. Spill her guts about what? She stood up. Walked right to the window. She said he was afraid she would tell me that the hearth wasn't just a restaurant. That it was a laundromat. I looked at her, the small, expensive person in an empty concrete box. My anger hadn't gone away. It just coiled up, becoming cold and hard. I asked her if she had known. She said no. Not really. Not the details. She thought he was just optimizing taxes. She thought he loved her. She thought they were building an empire. She thought I was the deadweight. I asked her why, then. Why did he make her hire that detective to watch me? Back at the very beginning. She laughed again. That same awful, empty sound. She said it was a test. His test of her loyalty. He wanted to see if she was willing to turn on me. If she was ready to believe that I was the problem, that I was the threat. And she had believed it. She said she believed it gladly. G.L. Consulting. It was a test she had passed. And it was his insurance to make sure she kept quiet. He was washing money through our restaurant. And we were just the pretty, tasteful window dressing. The hearth. A perfect place to burn fake cash. We went back to the restaurant. I don't remember the drive. I was just steering the truck on autopilot. We didn't talk. What was the point? Nashville was glittering with fake lights, and we were both part of the show. We walked into the hearth. Our home. Our crime scene. We sat down at the same table, table 7. In the dark. Only the emergency light from the kitchen threw long, ugly shadows across the room. She broke the silence. Her voice was scratchy, brittle. She said she didn't know how it started. That Gabriel saw her. He listened to her. He valued her mind. He told her she was the brains, and I was just the hands. I stayed quiet. I looked down at my own hands, flat on the oak table. They were covered in tiny white scars from burns and cuts. The hands that had built all of this. She must have mistaken my silence for sympathy. Or for weakness. Her breathing got faster. She said I had no right to judge her. That I was the one who pushed her away. That I only lived for my kitchen, my sauces, my goddamn rosemary. Her voice rose to a shout. She asked me if I knew what it was like, being married to a man whose only passion smelled like garlic and onion soup at 3 a.m. She jumped to her feet. She screamed that yes, she had slept with him. Yes. She wanted to. She screamed that at least he smelled like money and success. That he saw her as a woman, not a damned calculator who was supposed to pay for my creative impulses. She ran out of air. She stood there in the middle of the dining room, lit by the green glow of the exit sign. She was crying. Not from regret. From rage. I waited until the silence filled the room again. And then, I quietly pulled my phone out of my pocket. I held it so she could see the screen. I pressed the red stop button on the voice recorder. The app obediently showed the recording time, 1 hour and 14 minutes. Exactly how long we'd been gone, ever since we first walked into Gabriel's empty penthouse. Her tears dried instantly. She stared at the phone, and her face went white as flour. She whispered, What is that?" She asked if I had been recording. I nodded. Her eyes narrowed. She asked what for. For a lawyer? For the divorce? To take everything from her? I shook my head. I told her that a divorce was the easiest part of what was coming for us. She didn't understand. I explained it. Slowly. Like I was talking to a child. What she had just done. That in her fit of anger, she hadn't just confessed to cheating. She had confessed to being an accomplice. She had confessed that she knew about his optimizing. She confessed that her emotional connection to him was the reason she looked the other way while he ran his financial schemes. She confessed that he had used her to cover his tracks. I told her this wasn't for a divorce lawyer. This was for the FBI. I told her she didn't just cheat on her husband. She had made me, Daniel, her partner, an accomplice to a federal crime. She had dragged me into a money laundering operation. She stared at me. I could see the pieces clicking into place in her head. All her hatred for me, all her fear of Gabriel, it all vanished. Something new appeared on her face. Something I had never seen before. Pure, ice-cold hatred. She understood. She understood that I hadn't just caught her. I was saving myself. I had realized that when this whole thing came crashing down, that recording was the only thing that would prove I was just as much a victim as she was. Or, at the very least, that I was the last one to find out. I wasn't going to sink with her. She had made her choice when she believed Gabriel. I made my choice when I pressed record. She looked at me like I was a monster. Maybe she was right. She chose him to get away from me. I chose myself to get away from her. We were even. 6 months passed. The hearth didn't make it. It was shut down. Sealed with FBI tape, like the crime scene it turned out to be. The sign I used to polish by hand was covered in dust. Gabriel was wanted by Interpol. He had vanished, just like smoke from under a pot lid. Eliza took a plea deal. My recording, her confession, that was her ticket. She gave them everything she knew about Gabriel. She got probation and community service. I heard she moved back to Atlanta, back to her parents' house. And me? I was cooking. I wasn't chef anymore. I was a sous chef at a big hotel steakhouse out by the airport. Anonymous work. 12 hours on my feet, the constant hum of the vents, the smell of someone else's grill and someone else's money. I came in, cut meat, got a paycheck, and left. I didn't talk to anyone. I just worked. My hands finally stopped shaking. I lived in a small rental apartment above a laundromat. It always smelled like hot cotton. Yesterday evening, I got home from my shift and found a package under my door. A soft, yellow envelope. No return address. Inside, there was a cheap flip phone. A burner. And a note, written in a hurried, familiar handwriting. Eliza's handwriting. She wrote that I was an idiot if I thought the feds found everything. That Gabriel wasn't just a crook, he was paranoid. That he never trusted the cloud. That he kept a real book. On paper. She wrote that the book was in a bank vault. In New Orleans. That the key was with her mother, who thought it was just estate documents. She wrote the code to the vault. It wasn't a date. It was a phrase. The date I burned down our first rental kitchen trying to make her a flambé. I remembered that day. We laughed, smelled like smoke, and ate pizza on the floor. She wrote that she had given the feds everything. Except this. She wrote that it was mine now. And I could decide what to do with it. Burn it. Sell it. Take it to the cops. She didn't care. And at the very bottom, on the last line, she had added, "You owe me $5,000. I stood in the middle of the room. 5,000. The exact price of that first, fake detective report. The one that started all this. She wasn't forgiving me. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was sending me a bill. I looked at my hands, covered in fresh burns from the grill. I didn't know what was in that vault. Blackmail? Money? Or just another empty box? I didn't know what I would do with those books. But I knew that on my day off, I was flying to New Orleans. Not for revenge. Not for justice. To pay the bill. And maybe, finally, get a decent meal. And that's the whole story. If you like this story and want to keep hearing more like it, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell so you don't miss any new releases. Remember, your support is very, very important to keep this channel going. Now, what do you think? We all love a good revenge story, but this one is complicated. Daniel, basically, ratted out his wife to the feds to save his own skin. But did she do anything he didn't deserve? The question isn't who betrayed who first, but who betrayed who smarter. Or who was the bigger egoist? Did Daniel act like a man protecting his life's work, or like, well, let's just say it, a rat? Did he have the moral right to hit record after he pushed his wife to desperation with his own selfishness? And Eliza? Was she a victim of sophisticated gaslighting from Gabriel? Or did she just find a convenient, expensive excuse to betray a husband she was secretly ashamed of and looked down on? And what about that final $5,000 bill? Was that cynical revenge? A fair price for the information? Or was it the only way she could say we're even? What would you have done with that bank vault? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.